Ever since we went on the air, and it's nearly 60 years now, we've been doing a lot of talking on Channel 9, even a lot of arguing, because over the years, St. Louis has had to take on some pretty tough issues. But that has always been the challenge and the promise of public broadcasting. Provide a forum where we can air our differences and grievances, share our ideas, and work on solutions. What you're about to see is a new program, something that's going on every Thursday now at 9 o'clock. It uses all the latest technologies to do something we've been doing pretty well now for quite some time. We call it Stay Tuned. The 9 Network has always been a place for the community to connect around important regional issues. And with technologies rapidly changing, there are new pathways to redefine the relationship between media organizations and the people they serve. We're proud of our roots as the first public television station in the country licensed to the community. At 9, you have always been a vital part of what we do. And you've told us the issues that matter most to you. You've also told us that presenting or informing is not enough. You want to participate. You want to have a conversation about topics that are vital to a stronger St. Louis region. What would it look like to turn on your television and be a part of the dialogue?
I think in a time where it's increasingly difficult to have meaningful conversations around important issues, in a time where there really is only an opportunity to be for or against an issue or to have vitriolic debates, there really are very few opportunities for meaningful conversations for our community.
How many times have you sat watching a conversation on a topic that you are passionate about and you see it going off the rails in a direction that you know that something major is being missed in this conversation? I mean, what do you do?
We're not just educating, but we're really making people think about what's important to their community, and that's newsworthy. That it's not just a soundbite, it's not just a quick thing, and they may miss it, but we can actually have a civil discussion on it and go deeper.
If not for Stay Tuned, I probably wouldn't be watching too much public TV.
Stay Tuned, as I see it, is a chance to kind of take a deep dive on one issue and have a conversation that knowledgeable people would have amongst themselves, but then magnify that, put that in the megaphone of the 9 Network.
It's a real interesting, slightly different news show, one that I would want to watch.
Good evening. After seemingly endless part of the problem tonight on Stay Tuned, we examine what happened on Election Day. We don't. And in case you haven't heard, our country's in debt and the economy could be better.
Somebody could give hundreds of thousands of dollars. When I say somebody, I mean one individual.
So why don't you then arts topic or something live where I can rib the audience?
Does it need to change in Missouri specifically?
It's the results in Missouri from me were just a monumental mixed bag.
A city that is really divisive in a lot of ways, north and south, or however you want to look at it.
2,400 homes in Missouri are in some state of foreclosure. You got out there on social media, people are already talking before we even get going.
We've talked here about education, we've talked here about policy.
Why is this popular? Why heroin with our kids?
It's easily gotten, it's cheaper than prescription drugs, and it is a better high.
Thanks, Casey. Well, you actually are.
I want to talk to you because I want to make sure we get the ship out of the harbor. Is compromise a dirty word now?
I mean, you look at this and you think, wow, and it's only going to grow.
It goes deep on issues that you might, in a way that you might not get otherwise. Okay, that only leaves one. But I just want to mention that that's not without controversy.
It had taken up another level, especially on places like Twitter.
Stay Tuned represents an effort by the 9 Network and the Reynolds Journalism Institute at the University of Missouri to redefine public affairs programming.
Public affairs programming, especially the national cable networks, have created a very good business around public affairs programming. That's been accomplished by moving either far to the right or far to the left. And while that has been good business, it's not necessarily always the best journalism.
Camera One will shoot that.
That's not the kind of dialogue that I wanted to find, and that's what I'm finding at Stay Tuned. It's a news show that is polite conversation. It's okay to disagree. That doesn't mean we have to yell at each other. It's good that we disagree. It's different ideas, and that's a good thing. It's good for the community.
It's more than just a TV show. It's a social media-driven, participatory, ongoing dialogue. It's a pathway for people to mobilize their time, talent, and resources in ways that create change.
It makes you think. It makes me think. After I leave the studio, I'm still thinking, oh, not so much of I should have said this as much as, oh, so-and-so brought up a good point that I hadn't necessarily thought about before. And I'll think about it, not just that on the way home, but the next day and the day after that.
So our hope is that through the hour, our viewers again become better informed, better engaged, and walk away with an experience unlike anything they've seen on television.
Stay Tuned relies on participation from everybody, the organizations that address key issues, the experts, and those impacted both directly and indirectly. It's all about connecting people with ideas and organizations so that valuable insights can be exchanged. Through deep engagement, we tap into the pulse of the community and cover issues that people are talking about, issues they care about.
All the stuff that you would like to talk about and some of the stuff that you would rather not talk about, but we need to.
Saving high school graduates, economic impact of the arts in St. Louis. So how is the foreclosure crisis that started back in 2008 still having an impact? What happened on Election Day? We are talking about the ugly topic of heroin in the St. Louis region.
Health and healthcare, the environment. There are other issues around community life, issues around infrastructure, transportation, things that just improve life in our region. So those are the types of topics that we cover, and they are typically topics that you won't see great depth and context in other forms of media.
We're hoping that people will walk away and say, wow, you know, I didn't realize that that issue was that important or that serious or that interesting.
Stay Tuned seeks out thoughtful perspectives, providing information and discussion that can inform the decision-making process. But we don't decide for them. As a public media organization, we are a trusted convener, offering a platform for authentic conversation.
Makes me think about my own thought process, how I develop my feelings and attitudes and thoughts towards things. And I think it's good to have dialogue. It's stimulating, and I hope it's stimulating for the viewers too.
Stay Tuned is hosted by Emmy Award-winning multimedia journalist Casey Nolan, who has spent the last 5 years on the ground covering these issues for KSDK News Channel 5.
When it came time to think about who was the right person to host Stay Tuned, Casey Nolan really became the natural fit for it. He has a native intelligence around these issues.
I've been told, I think you have kind of a personal background and experience with this drug. Is that correct?
As a general assignment reporter for KSDK, he understands these issues and sees them firsthand. But I think this gives him a way to have a deeper conversation around the set of issues that he sees on a regular basis. And I think it is a very challenging role that he's taking on because it isn't just a soundbite. And he isn't really interviewing people. He's really facilitating a conversation with the community.
My role, in a lot of ways, is to be both prepared and knowledgeable about a topic, but also curious and comfortable to say, what do you mean?
How do you, when you're at the grocery store, explain to people what it is that you do and what it is the state is doing when we're talking about accreditation?
I don't know. I've not heard that. Or to facilitate, someone over here is saying, what about this? What can you tell us about that? So I feel like I'm kind of a conduit of information between the audience and our guests.
Excellent journalism is at the core of this program.
The University of Missouri School of Journalism is one of the preeminent journalism schools in the United States. Within the journalism school, the Reynolds Journalism Institute is interested in advancing new forms of journalism and public media. And in that context, Stay Tuned is a way in which the Reynolds Journalism Institute can work with us firsthand to study this new form of journalism, participatory journalism.
My name is Jennifer Long and I'm a journalism student here in Columbia at the University of Missouri. I also work on Stay Tuned, a collaborative effort between the 9 Network and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. RJI offers so much to our campus and the journalism community. Let's go ahead and take a look back and see just how this collaboration got started.
Years of tradition at the world's oldest journalism school leads to innovation. The Reynolds Journalism Institute opens in 2004.
Its purpose is to help journalists and citizens create better journalism.
RJI started with a multi-million-dollar grant from the Donald Reynolds Foundation with a mission of changing and improving journalism.
One of the things that's important is taking advantage of the new technologies that are spreading, and we can help by bringing some special projects and things that will build awareness and help them understand how some of these new technologies like Twitter and other digital tools work.
Although the Institute resides on a university, the impact of the journalism think tank reaches far beyond the college campus, but the university setting does provide an environment for research and discovery.
We have a strong research component, so one of the things about experimenting with things is you need to find out, well, did it actually do anything? Did it work? And we have that capability to not only create something new, but then say, you know, how much did it move the needle? Was it effective?
Headquarters for the Institute opened in 2008, which provided the campus and the journalism world with this state-of-the-art facility. There are many facets of RJI, including a research center, a futures lab, and technology testing center where professionals and students can experiment with new technologies. And it serves as a conference destination for media organizations.
Our goal is to find new ways to do journalism better. Take advantage of the explosion of digital technologies now and how people can acquire information.
Another way the Institute invests in the future of journalism is through its fellowship program. RJI Fellows carry out major projects aimed at enhancing the practice or understanding of journalism. RJI named University of Missouri faculty member Kent Collins a fellow for the 2012-2013 academic year, and sponsored his project to collaborate with the 9 Network on a new public affairs broadcast.
So stay tuned. This effort by the 9 Network in St. Louis is a real attempt to provide this public affairs programming with journalistic muscle from the Missouri School of Journalism and the Reynolds Journalism Institute to try and get a deeper, more meaningful discussion of what's important in the St. Louis region.
One of the things that's changed is citizens' insistence on being not just passive recipients of journalism, but participating in the process. So this experiment is aimed at finding how can they do that in a way that, yes, increases citizen participation, but that also produces quality journalism.
Institute members also say a public television network is the perfect partnership because of the nature of public broadcasting.
Well, this is a wonderful opportunity because, as you know, public broadcasting in the United States has a long tradition of engaging with their audience, with the people they serve. And so that's our work there is, can we use that long tradition of engaging with the audience who are watching television to invite other people who might not be Channel 9 viewers into the discussion.
So let's go back to another hangout.
And ways to do that? Twitter, Facebook, video chats, and live interviews. Something new for the network. Something new for the Institute.
The new media that is developing is giving us an opportunity to ask more people more questions and to put their answers either on television, on radio, or on the website. So social media, Twitter, Facebook, and the others, simple email, can make the public forum that declined because of the mass media. We can now make it bigger. We can make the public forum bigger, and we can make it deeper.
We don't have our station balance still, do we?
And something new for the next generation of journalists. University of Missouri journalism students also work on the project, working as reporters and experts of social media.
The team of student reporters goes out and finds people who are living this life, who are experiencing it firsthand, and then they make a story to sort of introduce the more in-depth discussion that we have later in the program.
The project is a new and exciting one, a true example of what RJI is meant to do.
I think our experiment with the 9 networks in St. Louis is really a good illustration of the kind of projects that we do at RJI, that is of taking these ideas about communications, testing them in the real marketplace of ideas, and seeing what works best.
And change what we know, not just here.
Maybe now, because of social media, we have an opportunity to reinvigorate the public forum in any city in America.
The evolution of social media has helped to redefine the traditional broadcaster-viewer relationship as we know it.
There's certain limits to how many people can participate in the studio. There are limits to how many people might call in on the phone line. There is really no limit to the number of people that can join us through social media.
Social media plays a really important role in Stay Tuned. Primarily, it's a driver for more conversation, but it really starts the show.
I am putting out sort of the feelers. I'm beginning the conversation almost a week before, 10 days before. We're on our 9 Network Twitter account. We're already putting out to the community, what do they think? What's their, not just what they think, but what kind of situations can they relate to? Can they give us some personal stories?
We know that meaningful conversations are happening outside our studio walls, and that those voices are a crucial part of any conversation. Through social media, Stay Tuned is constantly being shaped by your insights, experience, and perspectives, even while it's on the
Or
air.
at home, we want you to go to the Facebook page of the 9 Network. We put a question up there earlier today. We want
As
you to
viewers
comment,
participate
right?
in social media, the direction of the show is altered to include your voice.
The beauty of like Twitter, for example, is that people can actually watch and go one step further. So they're not just communicating to us, to the people in the studio at Stay Tuned, but they can now actually communicate to other people who are watching the same show, experiencing maybe different experiences, but for the most part, they're experiencing watching the show together.
I was tweeting about things and just commenting on the show, and someone responded to what I said. I can foresee no way that our paths would cross. But here we were having a conversation about something that is affecting both of our lives because we both live in the same community. That wouldn't happen anywhere else aside from in the Twitterverse.
We also utilize the Google Plus Hangout, an innovative tool which allows us to be joined by guests from across the globe.
If a person has a webcam and a computer and internet connection, they can be on our show. That opens up the possibilities.
For us at the 9 Network to be able to have the technology to bring in people from Chicago, from Atlanta, from Cape Girardeau, from within our own state, or even from within our own region, St. Charles, to have that technology at really the cost it provides, is unbelievable.
There was a real relationship happening there, a back and forth, a conversation, which is what a Hangout is. We want to be hanging out. It's not called Google Interview, it's called Google Hangout.
A great example of that is having experts who are from other cities, who experience these issues in other cities. Also our national public media colleagues, so our colleague from the PBS NewsHour, Hari Srinivasan, has joined us to talk about his expertise.
Over the last couple of days, but really you saw a very clear choice between the candidates.
The 9 Center of Public Engagement, which serves as a studio for this production, was designed as an interactive community space.
We've taken that space, which is a workspace. It's also a journalism space where professional journalists work. It's also a community space where people learn how to come and create content. But with Stay Tuned, it becomes a whole new forum space where people can come, meet with each other, connect with the issues, connect with other people via social media, and really better explore these issues.
And there's the audience that files in, and they all kind of have this like wide-eyed look, like, wow, we're on a set, which isn't something that everybody gets to do. That's cool. That's unique for them. And they sit down at their little stations and they start climbing on top of the social media platforms that they use, Twitter or Facebook or whatever they want to do. And they get to start reacting to what we're talking about. Casey's over by the wall talking with people in the Google Hangouts, and it's fun because that's people from all over the region, that's people from all over the place.
It's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot going on, but it feels very exciting, and it's a great way for the community to sort of experience the other side of what, not the studio side, but the other side of what a newsroom might be like, but then having more dialogue around that, because you're bringing up, again, topical issues that matter, issues that people have strong opinions on. So it's exciting, it's a nice vibe, it's a nice, energetic sort of buzz to the studio.
It's visually stunning, but it's also tailor-made for that kind of community interaction. So I think the physical space becomes very important, and it really is a different look and feel for Stay Tuned than any other production we've ever done.
Every Thursday evening during the broadcast, we are also joined by a live audience who are experiencing Stay Tuned firsthand and sharing in the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. We turn to the community because we know you have something to add.
I really want the technology to become transparent. I do not want that to get in the way. I want people to come away saying, this is a unique conversation. This is a unique experience. I participated in this experience. Instead of throwing my remote at my television because they were missing something, I got involved, and I watched the conversation change right in front of my eyes, like I've never seen before.
We want this to feel like a conversation that you might have around your kitchen table, which is why we invited community members to sit at our table.
I thought, oh God, I'm not an expert on anything. Why am I here? I shouldn't be here. But then I started to understand that it's not about being an expert. It's about being a representative of your community. It's about reacting to what the people on the Google Hangout and the different people who've been on there who've had something to say about the conversation that we're having in the show. Then we react to it. We're just members of the community.
I think these are all things that people discuss over lunch, discuss at work, discuss over their dinner table, and so I think it's nice to see it in a medium, to see it on television and get opinions and input from different people.
You guys, I don't believe any of you are political consultants. None of you are journalists yet, but all of you voted. So we appreciate you being here and joining us for this conversation quickly.
The community table is a place for diverse perspectives. It's where regular folks can talk about the issue, which is something you don't often see on TV.
St. Louis has a lot of smart people who care deeply about this city, of all ages, of all backgrounds. And I think sometimes not all of them feel like they have a voice. And I think the table can give a little voice to more people.
We all have something that we want to say, and we all have something that we want to. We all have something to give to the conversation, but we're also trying to pay attention to what's this person saying? Oh, what's Casey saying? What information is coming out of these people? Because we want to absorb all of that.
We heard from you, the community, that there are certain issues that are not being given enough coverage in the media.
We have many divides in St. Louis and the St. Louis region. And so much of what we do today is to bridge those divides, to find a way in which there's a civil conversation, civil dialogue around important issues. So Stay Tuned is a great example of how we can use our facilities, how we can use the power of public media, and how we can use new techniques of technology to bring the community together in that way.
Most of my friends are super engaged, and they want to be part of these conversations, but generally don't know where to go to have it. So Stay Tuned fills that niche, and they love it. They come in, they get to feel like they're part of something much bigger than just themselves.
On Stay Tuned, we take on these important issues, and we want our community to not only understand an issue, but to know exactly how it affects them and how it can be addressed.
It's not just, yes, well, that's a really well-produced show and they talk about good things, but that show makes things happen. I think that would probably be the best thing that Stay Tuned could do over years.
We know through our leadership role managing the National American Graduate Initiative that education is one of those key issues. One example is school district accreditation. You've heard of it, you know it's important to making sure our kids are thriving, but it's very complex, and it's generally only talked about in 30-second sound bites. So we took an entire episode of Stay Tuned to explore accreditation. Take a look.
How can we be sure our schools are making the grade? There are many ways to measure, but the state of Missouri gives a district its stamp of approval through accreditation. Chances are you've heard of it, but what is it? How can accreditation affect not just a school, but your neighborhood, family, and community, even if you're in the best district in the state? Stay tuned.
And help us understand this accreditation process. This is the state trying to measure our schools across the state. How do you, when you're at the grocery store, explain to people what it is that you do and what it is the state is doing when we're talking about accreditation?
Okay, as with the MSIP 4, which was what has been used in the past, there's 14 points.
MSIP for Missouri State School Improvement Program. That's something we're going to hear a lot about.
Yes.
And it's something that's going to we're in number 4. We're going to get the number 5 here soon. We'll get to that in a moment. But so when people hear MSIP, this is the process by which. Okay. So go ahead.
There's 14 points that is possible to have. If you have 9 points, then you're fully accredited. If you have 6, then you're provisionally accredited, and less than 6, you're unaccredited. With that, what happens? There's a chain of data that they look at. So it's
the state is looking. They're measuring by 14 different categories each school.
Once you become unaccredited with the MSIP 4, the easiest way I could explain it, it's almost like going into credit card debt. Once you're in deep with credit card debt, it's almost impossible to get yourself out.
It's such a branding problem, isn't it? It's complete branding and reputation. If you're an unaccredited school, this was picked up by the New York Times, you know? I mean, it's like, it makes the city look bad, even if it's challenging. I mean, even if things are changing and they're going in the right direction, it's about the brand of how it reflects the city. And I think that's the challenge, because even as you just pointed out, it's like if you look at the performance, it can be completely contrasted. You could say schools in the county, students aren't actually performing in some elements the way that they are for the city, but you could not tell anyone that based on how they feel from the PR side of things. I don't know.
The one big moniker put on top of everything else to kind of determine
perception,
what their education is, and that it's a district-wide. It's not school to school.
You read it in the 14 points and the 6 and the 9 and less than 6. I think that's great to explain it, but I always feel like there is this kind of like X factor, which is, I don't know if it's culture. I don't know if it's but it's like we have to acknowledge poverty. We have to acknowledge sort of the type of households that we're coming. Yeah, and I just don't know. This is beyond my scope of knowledge of how that is incorporated, or does it even matter when you are looking at this?
Well, look at the themes they were sort of talking about in terms of districts that are unaccredited. The St. Louis Public School District, Kansas City, Normandy, Riverview, all districts with large populations of minorities who if I looked at the data, I would guess and say they come from impoverished backgrounds.
Is accreditation are we being too hard on it? Is this something that we have to have?
It has to be called something. We need to be keeping track of children being educated, how well they're being educated.
Well, I mean, you've got to have a system that shows how good schools are, but I mean, like they say in financial investment, past performance is not necessarily an indication of future results.
I think that they all need to be judged the same way, and I can see that, accreditation, the whole purpose of the accreditation is to make sure that, that all the schools meet this acceptable level of quality. And so I think that the resources are very important. We don't have the resources that a lot of other schools have.
There's a lot more that goes with this. A lot of your panelists have talked about poverty, have talked about racism, have talked about the issues of the community that are all linked together.
I'm very impressed with the depth of the understanding of people about this. As you said at the beginning, it is a very complex process. But I think people also see that it affects lots of different parts of our world, our real estate values, the perception of people about our city, about our region, the future of young people. So I think people are appreciating that this is a very complex topic, and I think that's important.
Another example is the 2012 election. You heard a lot about the winners and the losers. At Stay Tuned, we asked, after all was said and done, did you, our community, win or lose?
Elections were on Tuesday. We taped that on a Thursday, and I think there's still a lot of just people, a lot of, I wouldn't call it tension, but just there was a lot of energy I think that people had, whether they were happy with the results of the election or not. And I thought it was a great night because it was a chance to, now that it was, once the elections were over, to talk about it, to hash out why you supported a certain ballot measure or why you didn't. So I thought it was I actually really enjoyed it.
you know, there's something to be said for a person who doesn't compromise their principles. But is compromise a dirty word now?
Well, what I thought was most interesting about all the guests that we just had, they all talked about how much, you know, people are going to be more moderate, there's going to be more consensus that has to be built. I want to know what makes them think that, because there's still a really deep divide in this country. All the electorate is tired of the deeply divisive politics, but I don't know if the politicians will ever stop doing that.
I will say one thing about the whole Akin thing as well, is that the best part of his campaign to me was his concession speech.
I agree.
That was a great speech. And so that kind of posture needs to be more prevalent in the Republican Party.
From the PBS NewsHour, we are grateful to be joined by Hari Srinivasan. Hari, you've been waist deep in this election for some time, doing a lot of reporting. You've had a couple of days to reflect. Just off the top of your head here, I want to ask you just to give us a couple of themes that have emerged now that you've had a couple of days to kind of reflect on what you saw on Tuesday.
You know, you've probably heard it over the last couple of days, but really you saw a very clear choice between the candidates, and you saw at least the Republican Party having to go back and recalibrate itself to try to figure out exactly what went wrong, how they can improve.
Well, thank you very much, Hari. Hari will be back, and not only his voice, but yours too will be a big part of our show. Talk about big money. There was $6 billion spent in the 2012 election overall. Did you see that in Missouri, and did it have an impact?
There's no donation limits for the statewide candidates. But
so that makes super PACs unnecessary, because a lot of times they just donate directly to the candidates. That doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means that they aren't needed as much from a tactical standpoint like in the federal level.
Yeah, right. But as I mentioned before, on the federal contest, they spent about at least $10 million against McCaskill early, but then they bowed out after Akin's rape comment, and they, for the most part, didn't come back. Karl Rove didn't come back. He was only going to come back if Akin dropped out and there was a replacement Republican, and there never was.
You know, what's also interesting is that comment it went viral on the internet. You didn't have to pay for that ad. That was a piece of, you know, beautifully shot video. All of a sudden, the next morning, there it is in your Facebook stream, your Twitter feed, or really even across old-fashioned newspapers. It's kind of like that there's no bad publicity except publicity, but it was out there, and not a dime had to be spent on it.
What stands out to you so far tonight in our conversation?
That this generation, those in their 20s and 30s, see TV ads as so 20th century. And so, yes, they are appalled at the amount of money being spent on them. It's not simply the money itself, it's the waste, because it's not doing anything for them. They're communicating in an entirely different way.
We want Stay Tuned to help inform our community, and that includes being an informed giver. Because while many of us donate our time and money, we wanted to know what's the real impact of philanthropic giving, and how is St. Louis different?
You know, every time the Coleman race comes around or the Red Cross holds an emergency drive, we hear it on television all the time that we're very generous. Do you buy that?
I do buy that, and I think it's important for us to really celebrate in our community the really long history of generosity that we have and should be very proud of.
I knew there was no way you would say no, by the way, but I do believe you, and I appreciate that. What trends are you seeing locally here that you can tell us about? You know, the last couple of years as we've been through the recession in St. Louis, is philanthropy changing in our town, in our region?
It's a very important question, and I think it mirrors what Patrick was saying kind of on the national level. But something that's very interesting for the St. Louis level is if you look at the giving pie, so the percentages of where the philanthropic dollars come from, 75% of the giving comes from individuals. About 5% comes from private foundations, and about close to 13 to 15% comes from corporations. That's almost the opposite of what we see in other communities like ours nationally. So they have much less dependent on corporate giving, a greater dependency and a greater asset base in those communities through private foundations. And so that changes the conversation for us in St. Louis.
Joining us, this is Kirby Burkholder with IFF. He's joining us from Chicago. Thank you for your time tonight and bringing your expertise to the table. Also with us, Michelle Corey. She's local here with the Better Business Bureau. They've developed some standards that we're going to talk about. And Amelia Bond with the Greater St. Louis Community Foundation. As the name says, she too is here joining us. So, folks, let me open it up to you all. Is it a bad idea to think of your charitable giving, your philanthropy, as an investment? We heard a little bit of that in the conversation there with Mary about how that's how people are starting to think. If I told you that's how I did my giving, what would you say to that? I'll open it up to all of you.
I actually think it's a great approach. So many individuals typically have looked at giving as kind of a one-time contribution. And one of the most important things we see in the nonprofit sector is this concept of long-term sustainability. And part of long-term sustainability is making an investment in an organization, getting initiatives off the ground, but then also looking to support them through the long term. And I think when you think about making an investment, you do the due diligence, and then you want to monitor things on an ongoing basis. So I think it's exactly the right mindset to have when individuals think about starting to make contributions to nonprofit organizations.
Yeah, Kirby, I totally agree. I think particularly donors today, as Mary indicated and you've just said, is donors are really looking forward to be an investment and expecting the return on investment, particularly this next generation. And we see that constantly at the Community Foundation, is setting up grant agreements and asking the questions and asking us to ask the hard questions on, am I getting the return for my gift?
Interestingly, as it relates to Gen Xers, is that I kind of feel sometimes actually overwhelmed about giving. I feel like you get asked so much, and I feel I'm at a stage as a young professional where I'm trying to build my own. I'm trying to buy a house, I'm trying to get this, I'm trying to get that, and it's like you are asked all the time. And so I think I have this kind of guilt of, where do you give? You know, how many places do you give and how much, you know?
So I would push back a little bit in the sense that, okay, when I look at envelopes, I go, trash.
Right.
Why aren't they actually telling their story in a better and more interesting way, a way that's compelling? I think people, especially Gen Xers or anybody really, they want to be compelled. So when I look at that, I go, I want to give my money. Like, wouldn't you rather have, any company, any nonprofit should be operating that way. But I don't see nonprofits doing that.
So I'm sitting at my desk the other day and I get an email that says we're giving all of our students books for the holidays from a local school. Click on this link, go to Amazon, it'll get sent right to the teacher. I clicked on the link, went to Amazon, sent a couple books.
So it was easy.
Tweeted about it. I believe in books. I believe in the organization. It was really easy for me in 5 minutes.
Literacy's good.
And that's how I gave.
We're joined by two folks who are kind enough to make time for us from Washington, D.C. Caitlin Fleming with Social Finance Incorporated. I'll give you a little plug, a St. Louis native, where your mother says you should call more. And Tim Delaney from the National Council of Nonprofits. What are you guys looking at when you watch the news as it pertains to nonprofits? What are you worried about?
Well, here in Washington, D.C., we're looking at the fiscal cliff as two major threats to America's nonprofits. More importantly, the work that they do in local communities. The first threat is there is scheduled right now in law an 8% across the board cut of all domestic programs, or virtually all domestic programs.
If a deal isn't reached, as we've been hearing about, those cuts go on.
Well, yes, exactly. It is existing law, and so if Congress does not step in before January 2nd, they will then cut all these programs. As a consequence, we're looking at cuts to Head Start for children, Meals on Wheels for elders. We're looking at food safety issues, transportation safety issues, disaster funding, all sorts of problems that are going to get cut.
Tim's right. I mean, the proposed cap on deductions, the recent national economic study indicated that even just a $50,000 cap could reduce charitable giving by $150 billion over 10 years.
Wow.
And this reduction in philanthropy and cuts to domestic spending, I mean, it's a real problem on the ground. That's, you know, fewer homeless people that can find stable housing and fewer children that can get educated. And as a lot of your guests have been talking about throughout the show, it's time to start thinking about investments in social programs.
Stay Tuned is designed to be able to shift, to take on issues you hear about on the news, and to create a forum for meaningful dialogue that goes beyond the headlines. Following the recent tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut, we created a very special Stay Tuned.
The title of your article was The Difficult Relationship Between Mental Health and Violence.
The shooter,
to address community concerns about our young people. With the Newtown massacre at Sandy Hook School just about a week behind us now, the coverage has evolved. The reactions and conversations have begun to focus, changing from simply raw emotions of sorrow, disbelief, and outrage to issues and questions about gun control, mental health, school
whether
safety,
or not we need assault-type weapons on the street, or whether or not they should.
and broader issues, the role of the media, a culture of violence.
Saved many human lives. And I can tell you it broke
And it seems that this tragedy is perhaps a tipping point, not just another mass killing, but one that demands some kind of response.
Does the president think that he needs to capitalize on this, get this conversation going, and see some action in the short?
There have been disasters that, for one reason or another, have focused the country on particular problems and solutions.
Earlier today, we had a chance to get some perspective from Newtown when Jim spoke with Hari Srinivasan from the PBS NewsHour.
Hari, you're just back from Newtown. I guess you were there for a few days. Just some quick impressions of how that community is doing, and really the impressions on you as you tried to cover this story.
You know, there are a lot of different people that have converged on that town, whether it's the aid workers, obviously the press. I mean, we're talking about a very small town of 27,000. That's Newtown, but when you look at the borough of Sandy Hook, it's even much, much smaller, and you add 500 to 1,000 journalists all swarmed around in that area. It's incredibly chaotic on some level because you see all of these people there that are trying to make sense of it. You see the press there trying to take the story and distribute it further. And then really at the center of it all are these people who are just in unimaginable grief. And it's palpable. It's every person that you talk to in the town. This is such a small area that they knew either directly the children or one of the faculty members that was shot.
Newtown only knows what did happen.
The children?
During our interview with Lillian Bittman, the list of those killed became official.
Just read me last name.
This isn't going to be nice.
Don't you film this.
Okay.
You knew at least a half a dozen of these people, these victims, personally.
Mm-hmm. Now we get to work. Now we support them. We do what we can. We bring them meals. We give them hugs. We love them. We take their other kids if they have any and help them with, I mean, we do whatever we can. We just help.
Help that will be necessary for Newtown, Connecticut to heal.
Do you have a sense yet, communities like ours, I mean, one of the reasons we're doing this program is for that same reason. Do you have a sense that this is affecting, impacting the rest of the country in a similar way, not certainly as direct as the folks who suffered through this, but impacting it in a way that perhaps the movie theater shooting did not?
You know, that's a good question. I think that one of the reasons this story seems more universal and broad, it's because they're all children. It's because that there's, regardless of what culture, what country you come from, it's an unequivocal atrocity. And it's something that's part of the reason why the international media descended on Sandy Hook and Newtown. And so I think that there are a lot of people that set their politics aside and they just start to think as parents.
It's always important to raise the issue, to think about the larger dynamics that are at play when a crisis like this happens. But for me, what I think about is the importance of helping kids have an emotional vocabulary, to be able to process large emotions, right? To be able to manage when any crisis happens. So what do we need to be doing? I think we need to be thinking about the emotional wellness of our children and what we can do every day as parents or as teachers or as community leaders to help to bolster their ability to navigate emotions.
I mean, in a sense, we're talking in this greater sense of mental health, Dave, not just because we want to prevent these tragedies, which are in many cases aberrations. We don't exactly know how they happened. But what beyond that in terms of the greater well-being of kids, not just the victims, not just the shooter, but kids in general, because most kids who have problems are not going to be killed or be killers, but they've got other issues that they've got to deal with.
Sure. Well, you know, from looking at it through the lens of youth development, and we work specifically with adolescents, but I think there's a whole continuum of developmental needs that we have to think about. I like to think in these kinds of circumstances about a couple of things. One, I think you have to stop. You have to take care of yourself and the people who've been victimized and the people who care for the people who victimized. And I think it's really important to step back from the moment and reflect so that you're not making decisions, policy decisions or action decisions in the moment of high emotion and high tension. I think that's very important. And I think that's something we can model to our children. So as children see how adults respond, they take their cues from that.
This is Tim Fitch, the Chief of Police for St. Louis County. And Chief, you were in the news a little bit this week because you said what maybe a lot of people were thinking, but you came out and said maybe it is time to talk about, as a last resort, arming our teachers or our or the principal or whomever in the school. First, before we've got a lot we want to talk to you about, but first let's talk about that for a second. Explain what you're thinking there, and what kind of response have you gotten from educators on that idea?
Well, mixed response from educators. A lot of educators have caught me on the side and said, I know I wouldn't be allowed to say this publicly, but I think that's a great idea. I'm a teacher, I'm a gym teacher, I'm a whatever, I'm an administrator. I'd like to have that option available, because if somebody came into my school, and everything we're talking about right now that you've been talking about, all is about how to prevent this kind of activity. What I've been talking about is, now you've got it in your school, what do we do about it? So that's a critical time period, because what you have is, from the time the person enters the school, they're in, now the counseling has helped, they're in, they've got the gun, they're starting to shoot, and law enforcement's been notified. That gap, that critical gap, is what I've been talking about all week. It's 5 minutes, it's 10 minutes, it depends on the local police department's response time. I'm comfortable when the police get there, they're going to handle the problem. But what do you do in the meantime?
Has there been a frustration in Jeff City on these particular things, or have you seen successes?
Well, there are things that work, but we often don't put money into them, unfortunately. We all say the right things about kids, how much we love them, and that they're the center of everything, but we often don't put our money where our mouth is. I was shaking my head thinking that the legislative session starts on January 9th, and so that means the new budget process will be happening. I've watched the budget being made since 1991, and every single year there's a crisis. There's not enough money. People come and testify to the legislature, pour their hearts out about the pain in their lives and in their community, what's going wrong, and the good work that places like Youth in Need that we're describing earlier, folks are doing good work. And if you could just give us a little bit more money, we could help more folks. Right now, only 1 out of 5 people that need mental health care through the Department of Mental Health are getting that health care. We have waiting lists and all kinds of programs. And every year we say, well, that sounds really painful. Who do you want us to cut so that we can fund your program? And we don't look at anything that would increase the size of the pie, and they're very common sense things that we could do to increase the revenue in Missouri so that we could fund these programs.
Barrett, as an educator, how does this discussion proceed from here? You know, we started out saying, is Newtown just something that's going to be a piece of history, or is it going to have an impact? Will we feel more than just the pain and sorrow from this? And from an educator's point of view, where would you like to see the discussion go? Not a solution necessarily, just the discussion.
You know, when these things happen, it seems like I always hear people say, you know, why? Why does this happen? But we never talk about the antecedents. And one thing that I've heard people talk about tonight is history, this history and this culture. And I think, unfortunately, in America, we have a history of violence. And I think before we can move outward, we need to look inward. And this is a great time right now to look at ourselves and say, what have we done as a people, as a culture, to perpetuate some of these things that have happened?
We are also connecting our work as a public media organization to this program, bringing issues from our other key initiatives and focus areas. For example, 9 is committed to keeping you informed about health-related issues. So we recently took on the heroin epidemic in our region, convening activists, civic leaders, experts, and community members for this conversation.
Heroin, that's not fun.
That's ugly, as our esteemed producer wrote it, the other night. That's a conversation that is not easy to have, and it's kind of raw. It's painful for a lot of people. So I would say our conversations are important. Is that surprise you that maybe not everyone knows what we're up against here?
No, I would like to think, since we've been working so hard for the last year and a half or 2 years to raise awareness, that everybody would have heard by now, but in fact they have not. And this is an issue that if it directly impacts you or somebody close to you, it obviously your awareness grows, but a lot of people think that it's not associated with their community or around them, when in fact we're finding more and more it's just about everywhere. So we appreciate the opportunity to have this.
Well, give us a real quick education too, because people may not know, like we saw in the piece there, it's not just a needle anymore. Just real quickly, how else is heroin used? What does it look like? What's the situation there?
Primarily it's powdered form. It's more potent than it's ever been.
It seemed like it was only an inner city issue. Right. So it's interesting that the issue now is getting attention on a national level. So I really want to know, I question the politics surrounding the issue. Is it an important issue because it's affecting a different demographic than it has historically?
Yeah, I mean, do you question our interest level? I don't know. Are we only interested now because it's affecting a different group of people? Is that something that crosses your mind?
Definitely. I think there's more of an air of urgency around it now because we see upwardly mobile, middle income, upper income, Caucasian young people in the suburbs suffering from this.
One of the things I thought was really weird, though, was that other states were looking to us for, what they say, Wisconsin or Illinois, different places were asking us, St. Louis, Missouri, what's your response to this? That makes me feel like we've got it much worse than a lot of places. If they're starting to turn to us and ask, how are you guys doing this? That probably, to me, that says we've got it worse than a lot of places.
I got a phone call. We were on vacation, and he had just basically come clean and said, Dad, I got hooked on heroin. And I told him that we loved him, and when we get home, we'll get you help. And, the things that Jude was talking about, it started out with marijuana, started out with drinking alcohol, and those are just gateway drugs into something bigger, better, stronger to give you a more higher high, so to speak. And so it's a prelude to getting into the heroin. And unfortunately, he lost his battle August 12th of this year.
Why is this popular? Why heroin with our kids?
Teens don't understand how highly addictive heroin is.
I'd like to add to that. I think the other thing that's critical to understand about heroin is it's easily gotten, it's cheaper than prescription drugs, and it is a better high from what we understand. So it's a very, very appealing alternative.
A more efficient high in a lot of ways.
Yes.
Where do they get it?
It's very readily available. We'll go back to what they were talking about, to where, my son's comment was, during his 90-day clean period before he passed, he was asked, why'd you do it? He said, well, I didn't think once would hurt.
Help us out here, first of all. What's standing out to you tonight? Is there something we've missed in a big way that you want to make sure people know about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've missed is really why people are taking these drugs. We've talked about that they're starting at a very early age with marijuana, alcohol, and then moving on to other drugs. I think we have to look back at the whole way this started was back in the 90s. There was an emphasis in this country on the treatment of pain. And all of a sudden, opiate analgesics became readily available and used quite frequently by doctors.
Pain pills. Prescription pain medicine.
And the more pain pills prescribed, the more leakage there was out into the community.
Stay Tuned is not a path to easy answers.
We're hoping that when people watch Stay Tuned, they'll actually leave initially a little bit more confused than when they started. They'll realize this is an important issue, that it's something they really do need to pay attention to, but they'll have a pathway to connect to resources to better understand that issue and to continue that conversation in their own homes and their own local communities.
We know there is no savior coming to fix the problems faced by our local communities. The solution lies within each of us. Stay Tuned relies on participation from the entire community to effect change. We want to have a conversation. We hope you'll join us.
It's important to who we are as public media. The only gauge of our success is not by viewership, it's not by the amount of advertising dollars that we sell. Our true gauge in which we measure our success is how we improve community life.
And wouldn't it be great if, as a result of Stay Tuned and a result of the conversations and the mobilization of the community, that shifts occur, that good things actually do happen?
What's exciting about this show is what we don't know. The show is built in a way that it changes, and it can change from week to week. It changes multiple times throughout the week as we're getting ready for the broadcast. So the most exciting thing to me about this show is something we don't even know.
It's not enough to just talk at this show. I've made a lot of friends and connections through Stay Tuned, and we're talking about how we're going to go out after the show and try and make things better. What are we going to do? We're trying to make the positive change.
It's local. I think it addresses issues that people in this region and are facing, and it gives you a variety of input. You know, not just the expert, not just the journalist, but people from the community. And then your sort of Google Hangouts are so reflective of such a mix of people. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I really look forward to seeing how it's going to develop over the next couple of years.
I think it's going to pay dividends to our community well into the future.
Until next Thursday night, stay tuned.
What are the issues that are important to you and to the St. Louis region? Share your insights. We want your ideas for a future episode of Stay Tuned. Call 314-512-9009 or email us at staytuned@ketc.org. Would you like to be a live audience member on Stay Tuned? Email us at audience@ketc.org. And you can always connect with Stay Tuned on Facebook and Twitter.